here, and I'm thrilled to be speaking with none other than the lovely Stephanie Wiggum for episode 4 in this first month of its existence with the Mixed Race Women's Collective. My name is Amita Mascati, and we're here today. We're Mixed Race Women Speak. And we have here the awesome, lovely Stephanie Wiggum. As I said, I'm really excited to speak with you, Stephanie. I know Stephanie through performing arts, through acting in Dinner Detective, and shout out to those that might know us through that too. I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I started that with that company in Miami, and when I moved to the Bay Area 2 years ago, soon after I met Stephanie, and Stephanie delivered. Stephanie is great. I want to tell you, Stephanie, you know, I looked up to Stephanie. She's a woman that did it all. She was hosting and co-hosting and acting and detecting and the whole shebangs, and that's just a little taste of her talent. And who she is as a person and human being. And I'm so thrilled that she's said yes to joining us today to explore and unpack something else that we had in common that I don't think we realized until recently, which is that we both have this mixed race background. And I am Puerto Rican and Indian, and I'm really excited for Stephanie to talk about herself and share with you who she is. And we're just gonna have a fun chat about what this might have looked like, our similarities and differences growing up as mixed race women. So welcoming Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. What do you, you know, what I'm actually curious, you know, when I messaged you over Facebook and I was like, hey, Stephanie, I have this mixed race women's collective. I'm the founder and I would love to interview you. What went through your head when you thought like, oh, like we're talking about my mixed race? Like what?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much that. I don't think of myself through that lens very actively, consciously. Sometimes, you know, as an actor, you're forced to think about your ethnicity a lot, maybe more so than in other industries. But I mean, except for that, myself as a personal identity, I don't think about it that way.
And I think it's so fascinating because like, that's not a problem, right? That I think that in some ways we're just like, you know, I know you mentioned, we just chatted, Stephanie and I were just chatting briefly before we clicked go live. And you mentioned that you identify a lot, as American, right? You're like, I'm an American, right?
Yeah, because I don't feel a close connection necessarily to my Vietnamese culture, you know, and I guess, I don't know, it's hard to say. And my dad's family is from the South. So I have some connection to that culture, maybe even more so than the Vietnamese culture. But yeah, I just think of myself as American.
That's amazing. And so I'm proud to be American, just like you. And I hope, especially in recent days, I'm definitely proud where we are at right now. But I'm curious if, you know, in this conversation, I'm really excited for those tuning in. If you know Stephanie, if you know me, if you like these episodes, feel free to drop comments, ask questions in the chat, share love. Stephanie's really excited to be here. And I was just like, oh my goodness, a new conversation. So please show her some love. But you know, Stephanie and I were just chatting before we went live, and I'm really excited, you know, to delve into this conversation with you about your life, starting from the beginning, like really from where you're born and everything, you know, from what you were born to sense of belonging, to your identity and subtleties, to the environments that supported your belonging or not. And just, you know, and how race and mixed race plays a part in your career and your life right now and beyond. And then of course, the very end, stay tuned all the way through, because at the end, we'll hear a lot more about Stephanie and what she's up to in the world. She's doing amazing things. So yeah, with that being said, let's start from the beginning. You can share what you want to share. Where were you born and raised? Tell us what it's like.
I was born in Germany. My dad was in the Army. But we moved to California when I was 2. He was stationed in Fort Ord, which is down a couple hours south of San Jose, the Monterey Bay area.
Wow.
There's an Army base. There used to be an Army base there. Now it's CSU Monterey Bay.
Wow.
So I grew up there. That's my hometown, that vicinity. And my parents had this close pair of family friends that we all became like our unit. You know, we went on annual camping trips together. We were all, you know, in the same church and all this stuff. And their kids were mixed race as well. So
Wow.
my friends group, my core friends group growing up were all half Korean. So
Wow.
kind of defaults, I guess. I mean, I didn't think about it really, but when you asked me to start thinking about it, I was like, oh, actually, come to think about it, maybe that's why I don't think of this as a lens, because all of us were mixed. So to me, that was just normal.
That is so beautiful. You were like, you grew up and you look around you, right? You're born in Germany, but by this time you said in California.
By the time I could remember, yeah.
Right, you're born in Germany, by the time you can remember in California, you're looking around and you have other friends that are, did you say Korean and white?
Here, yeah, one family was Korean and white, and the other family was Korean and black.
Bada bing, bada boom. You're like, okay, so.
And then here was us, me and my sister, Vietnamese and white. So that was just our group.
That was just our group. I'm so touched and moved already by this, because it sounds to me like you were really like born into this reality, into this world in which moms and dads from different cultures, different races, different colored skin, right? Like there wasn't really anything about it.
No.
Like that, like nothing that you signaled you on that like bad or wrong, which is right.
But certainly not that, yeah, but also not even that exceptional, you know.
Yeah, like just kind of like, no, this is kind of like that's calm. It felt it didn't feel
like, yeah, not like every single person in my life was in a mixed family, but I knew, you know, people who were the same race as, you know, their parents both, and then, you know, it was yes, all of the above. So it was like a lack of exceptionalism.
So wow. Okay, so you're now like into this like mixed race like reality. You're born in mixed race reality. It's common. It's like commonplace. You look around and you're like, everybody's mixed race. That's great. Okay. So I'm curious, you know, you said your dad has a background, right? You're born in Germany, but your dad is from Alabama, right?
Yeah, his family is all in the South. So yeah.
And then your mom is Vietnamese, right? And so what did belonging look like for you? You know, that's a theme that I've been asking every woman I speak to, you know, in terms of getting to know ethnicity or not. Like, what was it like growing up?
Well, okay. I always just felt like I belonged, and maybe I was just oblivious, or maybe people were welcoming. Partially, there isn't a large Vietnamese community in the, there is a fairly large Vietnamese community in Monterey, but we were not close to a Vietnamese community in the Monterey Bay Area. So I never had an opportunity to either feel close to that culture or rejected by it. So that it was just a non-issue. And then also because my dad had moved to California when I was so young, when I encountered Southern culture, that when we went back to visit, you know, they were pretty welcoming, and I always felt like they just accepted us, you know. And in fact, it's only later as an adult that I even could examine it at all. You know, oh, I wonder if they see us as the odd mixed race girls, you know. But I think that they did. I never felt that when I was young, for sure. So I always just assumed I belonged.
That weird? I mean, I would assert as it should be, right? Or like really, you know, we're born whole, complete, perfect, I would say, right? We're born hopefully without a scratch, right? And even in infirmities or deformities, like we're born in our wholeness, right? And I think it's so beautiful that you said that. You're like, no, I just belonged, right? And yeah, I'm wondering, and when I ask this, it's not my intention to dig, but maybe uncover, because I know, you know, we had chatted right before this too about there are always moments that maybe pose small or large challenges, right? Even just subtleties. And then there's also things to celebrate in anybody's identity. So I'm wondering what it looked like for you. Like what, you know, when you spend time with Vietnamese, you know, groups of friends or white groups of friends, was it that kind of like homogenous? Were you always in a diverse community and you were just like, yeah, I'm just like cool. I'm just like one of the team, like mixed like you and me. Like, what was that like?
There is definitely some moments if I was spending time with a mostly homogenous Vietnamese community, especially women, to get glimpses of how much Western beauty is kind of prized, and having those reminders to have a woman compliment you, a beautiful, Vietnamese woman compliment you, be actually effusive about how you looked mixed because you look more white than them. And
what was that like for you? What was that experience like for you when women?
I mean, it's a compliment, right? And you want to welcome a compliment and make it make you feel good. But it also, it's a little bit othering, right? It's a reminder of an outsideness a little bit. And it's also a reminder that's, pretty heavy about how much messaging ethnic women get about that their ethnicity is not desirable, or it's only desirable when it's diluted, right? I know Vietnamese women who have gotten surgery to give themselves an epicanthic fold on their eyes because they believed that having a monolid was ugly, and my voice is cracking because that's really sad.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a thing to deal with and be like, okay, you want to feel like a beautiful human being and treasure your background. But to be like, oh, but it's also loaded with, ethnic looks must be diluted and you're considered more attractive because you're more exotic than white, but not so ethnic as your peer. Like, that's so freaking heavy. And to even think about it, it's like, can I just be me?
Totally. Yeah. And I thank you for sharing that, vulnerably. Like, we're moved right along there with you. I know I am, to be like, to get connected to like the standards of beauty and like how we get, this is all people, but especially women in our society.
Women in this industry, right, where you're looking at casting calls like, oh, they want ethnically ambiguous, they want Asian, they want white, and like, which one do I apply for? What box do I go in? What's my agent sending me for? And you're like, ah.
Right. And yeah, totally. It sounds like you're right. It's that. It's like in measuring, I'm hearing you say, like, in measuring yourself up a bit, in like kind of like holding yourself up, as we do as humans in comparison to other people. You're like, well, where do I fit in? Or and in some ways, I know that all human beings, but especially women and especially mixed race women, do look at like these taking cues sometimes from these subtleties about like, okay, like, well, how do you see me? And how do you see me?
Yeah.
How do you see me? So I'm curious, like, what do you remember, any particular moments, either growing up or in your teenagedom or your young adulthood, that you felt that, you mentioned even casting as well. Like, did you ever feel like how, like that kind of thing where you're like, I'm being measured up here to see like if I'm this enough or that enough?
Yeah, I mean, some of it is internalized. Oh. I'll tell you this story, which has somewhat of a happy ending. I remember when I was just out of high school, I wanted to go audition for a local theater company, was doing Romeo and Juliet. And I was in a college theatrical makeup class at the time. And I was like, I don't think they would cast a lead as an Asian woman. I had convinced myself of that. No basis in reality, or nobody had ever said that to me, right, explicitly, but I told myself that that was the case. And I remember asking my makeup teacher if she could teach me how to make my eyes look more white so that I could go do this audition because I wanted to play Juliet. And that's so sad. Yeah. And the end of the story is that it was all ridiculous, and she told me I shouldn't do it. I ended up casting the show in the ensemble, and they ended up casting an Asian man as Romeo. So I got a nice reminder that I shouldn't be, so ingrained with my nutso biases. But I think it's a really telling story about how we subconsciously absorb all this stuff.
Yeah, totally. And thank you for sharing that. It's like, and how do you, and it sounds, and thanks for sharing, especially your feelings around it, that it was like, this was sad, right? And
yeah, it's like, I feel gross now, 20 years later, like, did I really convince myself that I had to like change the shape of my eyes to get a part? Like,
Right. And told and yeah, and I mean, you know, like it's what you said, right? It's like that somewhere along the way you internalize the message or again took cues from the outside.
From somewhere, right? Yeah, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, like yeah, I'm wondering, like, you know, you took cues from somewhere that had it like, oh, I absorbed this message that for me to get the part, for me to be the lead, for me to be maybe underneath it, valued, important, the best, I need to look a certain way, or maybe look more of my other ethnicity, which is white. So I'm just wondering if at all have you looked at like how do you think you kind of mentioned a little in that moment how that might have that had an impact in your passions, in your dreams, in your dreams. Have you seen that? How do you think, and I know that this might be the first time somebody asks you, but like, how do you think that may have impacted you, like growing up and developing your identity?
I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just flabbergasted at the memory because I'm like, where, you know, my high school, you know, I started in the performing arts and in my high school dance company. And the high school I went to was so incredibly diverse. That it was a minority white school. We had a large Vietnamese population, a very large Filipino population, Hispanic, Black. I mean, basically it was like each piece of the pie was just about even, you know, there was no majority.
Wow.
Right? The majority was diversity. So such a blessing to be surrounded by all of this multiculturalism. We would have, you know, extended lunch day at the school where every cultural group's club would have like a food booth, and you could walk around for 2 hours and sample like the most incredible food all being put on by the clubs.
Wow.
What a wonderful thing to have that level of exposure to diversity. But despite that being my experience as a teenager, I still had that in my mind that, you know, this company would somehow prefer to have a white lead, right? And of course, the reality was they didn't, because they ultimately ended up casting an Asian man as Romeo. But where that still came from somewhere, right?
Right.
So I don't know. It's crazy.
No, and it is crazy, and I think that's so beautiful and poignant that you shared that you're like, even in the midst of, even surrounded by this like,
yes,
loving, diverse, multicultural community where the majority was diversity. You know, the diversity you mentioned to me earlier today, like the diversity was the default. You felt like it is the default, like everyone's diverse here. And still somewhere inside your head, right? Yeah. You had it like, because perhaps my question would be now, perhaps even though you had that, did you know, I'm sure you had TV and internet, you know, to some extent, and like where like, it sounds like you knew that even though maybe here this is a safe space, like out there in general, where do you think you got the messages from that like, well, I'm you know, if I don't look white, you know, no dice, right? Like it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I mean, it is, it's just, I think it's just so, vocabulary is escaping me. But like, you know, you ask a fish, how's the water? And the fish goes, there's water, you know, like,
right.
It's just around. You can't, you know, it's any one thing. Yeah.
But it's like you said, it's just something that is, to your point, you know, it is something that is something we've grown up in our society, in American society, and not even perhaps in many other countries as well. This idea of this like centrism, perhaps around like desired beauty features and whiteness. And I'm curious, as someone who, you are white, right? You are white.
I am.
And you are too. Right. And sometimes I've also, you know, I used to say I'm half, and I've stopped saying half. And I know you've shared with me, you know, in our mixed race women's collective group, which Stephanie has so graciously joined. She has shared even a meme that was like, look, I'm not half this, I'm not half. I'm like, I'm everything, right? I'm whole, I'm 100%, what I'm being. And I really, that speaks to me. Like, I wonder what, how, you know, what has spoken to you? Where have you felt whole, complete? Like, because you know that, right? Like there's two things. It's like you're white, you know, And being white and ethnic, did you ever feel did you feel like you found a home somewhere? Like,
well, theater actually, and maybe that's the grand irony of the story. Theater is my home. That was where I ended up belonging the most. And it's one big island of misfit kids once you find theater, and if that's where you belong, you know it, right?
Yeah.
And but it's ironic too, because it's not because of the ethnic diversity. I mean, that's a big criticism that American theater is so predominantly white. Actually, white American theater is under fire a lot these days for its kind of ethnic homogeny. But yeah, you've bond with people over not fitting in. Like you fit in with this group because they all know what it's like to not fit in, and they are welcoming.
100%. That resonates. I know theater is how we met each other. And I do think that, as mixed race women, especially, we deal with, what is my identity? How do people see me? How do I see myself? I'm American, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Indian, I'm Vietnamese, I'm white. And in general, like, everyone does deal with belongingness. So even if there's a bunch of actors and actresses out there, right, that are not mixed race, so many people have dealt with the sense, like, belonging. And I would agree. I think it's so great, and I think I love what you said. That I've quoted you, like, theater felt like this one big island of misfit kids, where it wasn't like rebellious or not necessarily, but just felt, like you said, misfit, like feeling like, where is my home? Where is my community? And speaking of community, I am wondering, so, like, how has your community of the performing arts or other communities, if there are too, how has that supported your sense of belonging from your teenagedom? Now we take it into your adulthood and beyond.
I mean, it supports it completely to me. This has been, once I've found my theater family, and even if you change theaters and find a new family, it's still, that's just where I'm going to belong now. I stopped doing theater for a little while I finished college, and I moved away from it briefly. And when I realized how big a hole it left behind and went back, that first show, when I came back to the theater after that, it was about a 7-year hiatus, and it hit me so hard. I was like, I'm never going to stop doing this in my life, because I had this, like, epiphany, like, wow, I really missed this.
Yeah.
And suddenly this hole that I was ignoring was filled again. And I was like, this is just where I belong and what I should be doing. And I'm going to make this my life. And I guess it was about 3 years after that, once I started going back to doing theater after that long break, that I actually ended up quitting my day job and making the performing arts my life.
Wow. And congratulations. And I really want to honor, I really get the world of, being at college and taking some time and focusing on other things and recognizing, like, I love the stage. The stage is my home. Maybe I appreciate the spotlight. I appreciate the chance to shine and share my voice and connect with people. A cast is like a family. It's like a great team that works together, right? Creative. So that's great, and congrats now. So your performing arts career, like 100%, like all in on that, has been since when?
Oh gosh, what year was that? So I'd have to do year math. Like, 2014. So I think it was like 2017 that I took the big leap, and it was like, I'm gonna drive for Lyft if I have to. I'm gonna just take, I took theater shows, I took commercial work, and I steadily was building up income streams and all the side hustles and all the stuff. So yeah, of course, now, in a weird twist of fate, I'm back to having a day job, but it's in the theater, because now I'm the marketing director for Tavern Theater Company.
Hey, that's fantastic.
Back in my life, but I still live and breathe theater. So
yeah, I mean, and really contribute to it through marketing and promoting and supporting arts, which is something that I resonate with too. And that's what I aim to do in my work in education and then social media. So I love that.
Yeah.
And thank you for that. And, working with, different organizations, right? Nonprofit organizations and otherwise to really bring our voices to light, justice to light, environmental justice, all of that jazz. I'm curious now, so you've been studying for the last few years in this performing arts career. You are an actress, right? First and foremost.
Yeah.
And it's theater is your home. And I'm wondering, what part does your mixed race, you alluded to it a little bit before, what part does your mixed race play in your day-to-day, in your job descriptions, in your, as a being cast?
Not at all. Certainly not as an arts advocate and a marketer, communications professional. If as an actor, there's no avoiding that. We want to encourage, no longer talking about blind casting, but actually color conscious casting is appropriate these days. And we're trying to, get more diversity in casting in general in the theater community. It's been very much under critique in the last year.
Yeah.
So there's no avoiding that, from a casting standpoint, and obviously there's many predominant number of roles that your race or ethnicity has no bearing on whether or not you would be appropriate for the role. And then there's a small percentage of roles where it is important, and then you have to be very careful, with casting. And they're like, oh, is it, would you cast a Vietnamese woman to play a Filipino role? Are you all Asian women equivalent, or what if you couldn't find an African-American actor and you ended up casting a different person of color from another ethnicity in what should be a Black role? And that's all really loaded. And I'm glad I'm not a casting director.
The casting director. Yeah.
But I guess, so it's your question. As an actor, you can't avoid that, and you'll always, I think, have, that feeling of looking at that character description and being like, am I appropriate for this role? What are they looking for? Will my whiteness rule me out? Will my Asianness rule me out? All of that. As a communications professional, I really shouldn't have anything to do with that.
Yeah, no, and I totally get that you're really in theory, and as we speak to in the society more and more, really embracing diversity and cultures, right? How it really shouldn't make a difference.
Right.
And so on the flip of, I really like what you brought up about the flip of colorblind being really color conscious and intentional with hey, is what we're representing right now homogenous? Is that our intention, or do we want this to ever be white centric? Do we want everybody to look white because maybe we're telling a story of some level of history, like it's a ragtime show or something? Do we want everybody here to be Black, right? Or even then, do we want to still represent other folks, right? What do you think? Yeah,
it's a very complex topic, and you certainly. If you are going to always hide, some people, tricky. Some people could say, I'm telling a historic story, and there just wouldn't be any diversity, right? This place and time would not have been diverse, so I'm going to have a homogenous all-white cast. And I think we're suspending disbelief. It's not reality, so rather than just stopping, we don't want to tell everybody to stop telling those stories, but I think that it's totally reasonable to just be like, oh, some people are Black and maybe not specifically in that point in time in that restaurant that you're showing in that scene would there have been integrated people, but fiction, it's art, are you going to go and make sure there's no, synthetic fibers anywhere on set? We're not making it this flawless representation. It's art. And I think to me, that's an excuse. This is a whole other subject. I feel like
but I'm really glad, in getting to know you, we're speaking, through the lens of mixed race, but I see that, maybe no accident or coincidence that really speaks to you, right? That you're at the end of the day, this is art. And what message do we want to send? Right. What stories do we want to highlight and portray? And I am really grateful that you share that, because it's so, so it sounds like, okay, so you're like, okay, color conscious casting, ensuring that you're not casting, also really respecting race and ethnicity. Okay, a Vietnamese woman is different than a Filipino woman, right? Don't just do we blanket it all together as Asian, or Indian it's different than Pakistani? Do we just blanket it all together? You can have them get along, but there are distinctions, right? So what is your, what does it look like now for you in terms of, I know as a fellow actress too, about the world of racially ambiguous. In what ways do you relish in that? Is that fun? You're like, oh, that's great, I can play all these things. And in what ways have you seen maybe your ambiguity? Does it harm you? Does it confuse people? Like, I'm curious your thoughts on your career in the last few years.
I mean, I guess from a just straight up, I was an actor trying to survive. I'm trying to pay my rent with acting jobs. Mm-hmm. And from that point of view, I am grateful. I am grateful to say, oh, ethnically ambiguous is trendy in the like corporate world right now because they all want to look diverse. I'm like, yes, I will cash your checks, And to have a little bit of liberty to be like, depending on the casting director, they'll cast me in something that was maybe white, or they'll cast me in something that was billed as Asian. It opens, I feel like I have a wider breadth to apply to. So as much as like it stresses you out as a human being, from a practical standpoint, as a working actor, I have a lot more options.
So in some ways you feel like you're like, this is great. This is a great thing.
No, yeah, I have 3 different, categories that I could realistically submit my headshot for,
It's just, and it is really interesting just to see, like, talking about that, right? Being racially ambiguous in this world of acting and what that looks like and the access that provides. And to be honest, I find, this is opinion, right? But I find that to be a relief as someone who gets it, that especially as me being a mixed race woman, growing up Puerto Rican and Indian and experiencing like you, like being in a group of Latinos and them kind of being like, oh, well, there's something a little bit different about her, or being in a group of Indian folks and just being like, oh, but she's that Latina girl. Right. Hold on, I'm also Indian. Like I'm totally over here, right? I'm totally with you here. I got the hair, I got the eyebrows. I'm with you. and physicality or not, like I've got the upbringing and the cultural connection to those communities, right? And so in those moments of othering or feeling a little bit like, oh, I'm not quite all this, I'm not quite all that, a little excluded, it is a relief and it's nice, and I think exciting too that, if anything, I would say, mixed people deserve to have a little bit of access and range to go, oh, we got range, right? Maybe that's range and racial ambiguity. But and yet this is what it looks like for, right, a modern day actress for you. So speaking of modern day acting, I would love to hear from you and share. We've been chatting a lot about mixed race and your upbringings, and what are you, if anything, are you doing right now or interested in doing that? Do you happen to do anything cultural, like, what's the word, in your profession or personally that ever speaks to your culture, your Vietnamese culture, or your combination of cultures, right? I know that it sounds like you didn't always feel like you had as many Vietnamese folks growing up, but you did have diversity. So I'm curious if you ever explored that, like what more into this ethnicity that is the non-white ethnicity.
Mostly through food.
Yes, food is totally
yeah. So that's one thing growing up. My mom, had to learn to cook Southern food for my dad that he, dishes that he grew up eating. So she learned to make, and then taught me Southern potato salad, which is one of my prized recipes. And then
Southern potato salad. That's that Southern in you.
You cannot beat. So, but then she also taught me, more traditional Vietnamese food. So I feel like as
Southern potato salad and what?
Egg rolls and gak. Am I gonna say it right? Gak and
Nice. So okay, got it. And so
No, I think I said that
you
wrong.
were like, and
Ganjong. That's it.
what's it called?
I'm just trying to remember the name of this chicken dish. My Vietnamese is non-existent.
But let me tell you something. That right there is so key. I want to acknowledge you for that, because why I have started these conversations is because I'm out, like I said, I'm on a mission to meet other women like me and connect in. And the similarity that we have is that I'm very much more tuned into my Puerto Rican heritage in some ways through language, because I also speak Spanish and I learned it. And I love my Indian background, and I grew up in Edison, New Jersey, which is super culturally diverse, but especially like a huge South Asian population. So I have a lot of Indian friends growing up, and I know we're surrounded by Indian folks. But sometimes due to language, like do you speak Vietnamese or know any?
Enough to order food at a restaurant.
But you got me there, because for me, like that's the thing. Like I love the Indian culture, so I love it so much. It's so rich, and where I feel so exceptional and so talented in English and Spanish, just for, choices I made and didn't make. And with my parents too, I don't speak Hindi. I don't speak Gujarati that well. So when it comes to food, I love it, Indian food. But, even my boyfriend, who is Indian, will be like, how is it that you don't actually know what this is called? You've been eating it your whole life. I'm like, let's go. This is a mixed race experience right here. I might have the name for it. Maybe I have not labeled it, but I love it. And I feel that way about us. Maybe you want to label us or not, but you got to love us. You got to love it, right? And love itself. But so I just want to say that that's so perfect that, okay, whether you know how to say their name or not, it'll be nice if you learn how to say it, but it's like, it's been part of you, right? It's been part of your upbringing. Yeah. Have you ever had moments like that? Because that's how I feel about a lot of Indian dishes that I'm like, yeah, I'm Indian. That's what's that thing again? But it's so good, and I have pride. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I definitely feel more connected to the Vietnamese side of my heritage through food, and like I said, I don't speak the language, but I do, for the most part, when I can remember what it's called. Like I can say those words. Those are the ones I know, and I know like how to count. So if I needed to order, 5 egg rolls, I could do that.
That is too funny. Yeah, and that's what. And I'm curious now, right? Because we're bringing it back, and I'm glad we have that. We've got mixed race in common, we've got theater in common, and theater. And I am really also curious too. We've even just talked about like, we have this Asian heritage, right? So even with limited language skills, learning food and all that fun stuff. Have you ever thought about learning Vietnamese? Has that been something interesting to you? And also you could say like, you know what, I don't need to, but I feel like a lot of times, like, I don't know, how have you felt about it is my question, right? Have you felt about it?
It feels a little overwhelming for sure. My sister very recently, she's older than me. She very recently in the last few years has started learning Vietnamese. And I guess I'm a little jealous, and I do feel a little bit guilty, like I ought to. Maybe I feel like I should do, but I also am not inclined to. So I don't have an internal motivation to learn Vietnamese.
Sure.
I feel guilty that I don't.
Wow. I totally get that. You're like, maybe I'm not super excited about learning a new language that maybe, that you might not need to use with everyone.
Does that make me a bad Vietnamese person? I don't know.
There you have it. And then there's standards, right? And then there's expectations. And then whether they come from our own culture, whether it's our Asian culture, Vietnamese culture, Indian culture, or whether it's from, am I being Vietnamese? Am I being Indian? Am I enough if I, like if I do that or not? Well, I acknowledge and applaud you. And again, I think something really important to say, and maybe for you and me, it might be obvious, but I think that it's something that needs to be said, that, okay, so just because I don't speak an Indian language doesn't mean that I'm not Indian. Just because, or I don't own that as an identity, just because you don't speak it doesn't mean that. And I think it's just, I don't know about you, but perhaps that's me digging up wounds, because I definitely know that there's been times where people were like, well, I don't know if you've ever got this, but I got like that. Well, but which one are you more? Have you ever got that question? Because I've definitely had people be like, oh, so you're Puerto Rican and Indian. Maybe it looks different because you're mixed, like you're mixed white. I don't know. But people will be like, so which one are you more? I was like, do you know how this works? My mother is Puerto Rican. My father is Indian. They had a baby. It's me, like 50-50. And again, like, I know that's a lot more common now, but 30 some years ago and growing up, maybe not so much. So I don't know. What do you think? Have you ever experienced that?
Not as much, and I wonder if it is because of the white thing, because there's so much of a centrist, you know, white culture is a more dominant culture.
Sure, yeah.
That sounds terrible, but I think you know what I meant.
And it's not bad, and it's like it's kind of accurate. It's a majority, right? It's to be a majority in our country, Leah, right? So
yeah, and you have all these views of it being as a default, and that anything else is othered, and
right.
that. So I feel like I don't get asked that question, and that is an interesting difference to ponder. But there's a certain element of being someone saying, "Do you feel like it in one place more than the other?" You know. And in that way, like if someone were to ask me that, I would say, yeah, I feel more affinity towards Southern culture than Vietnamese culture because I've never been to Vietnam. We never spent a lot of time living in a heavily Vietnamese community. You know, I don't have a lot of knowledge of, you know, Vietnamese art, music. So from that standpoint, I don't have much besides genetics to feel and food to feel really connected to a Vietnamese identity.
Totally. And I guess my question is like, what has that been like for you? I totally get it. You embrace the Southern, right? You embrace the Southern belle, the Southern girl, the types or not. But like, what's that been like for you?
I mean, it's just something to feel like where you have a place that you come from, right? So that's connected to that, being like, okay, I can, that resonates with me. I mean, yeah. I don't know.
No, I think that's great. And I think it was so key and beautiful that you said, and I really appreciate it because I think that there are some people, and look, I'm not white, right? And I have white friends and I love white people. And I think there's a lot, I love people, right? And so, but I have met a lot of friends that not maybe having, for me, maybe it's a blind spot. I'm so ingrained to like, pretty strongly identifying with these cultures that I've been raised in that have like shaped a lot of my life. And along that religion, my mom is Puerto Rican Catholic. My dad is Indian Muslim. A lot of the cultural religious components are really, I took the reins and like, you know, like that shaped me or I allowed it to. But the point is that I speak to a lot of friends or people that are like, I don't really like, I don't know I guess my culture is American and that's not a problem, right? That's not a problem, but it's different than other cultures, right? So I think it's beautiful that you said that it's to feel you have some place you come from, right? That you feel like, what can you claim as your origin, right? Your origin. So I'm curious, you know, like how do you feel about your Southern origins and your white father origins, right? And I know you lived in Germany. I'm just curious, like how, like, you know, pride, this, that, like, and I think that's fair. I think I would preface this to say that, you know, I can imagine what sometimes people feel like if you're white, you feel like kind of guilty, like, oh, is it a problem, like to take pride in my like whiteness? Like, is it going to be like perceived weird if I like I'm proud for my like Southernness, right? It's not like supremacy, it's like pride. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Oh yeah, and it's certainly, in those terms, yeah, the pride is in the elements of the culture, right? That you feel that that I think are worth taking pride in, and you know, food aside, which is great. I mean, you really just cannot go wrong with fried chicken. But you know, hospitality and welcoming and politeness, like, you know, the formality of Southern manners and stuff like that, you know, none of those are to do with race. And there is, definitely an ugly side to Southern history, and I certainly wouldn't embrace that. But yeah, there would be a cultural thing. And I do wonder if maybe I spent some time learning more about Vietnamese art and culture, if I would feel that affinity or not. Because at least with my childhood, you know, we did go back and visit every few years or so. So I had some immersion in that culture that I've never had for Vietnam. So I don't know if I would feel differently, or if it just feels like this other very distant part of me that I haven't really connected to.
And I totally get it. And it's totally fine. And I think it's beautiful that you share that with us vulnerably, because the reality is like, yeah, you grew up in America, right? You have this Southern background, you have this, you know, that, and like you said, like the dominant culture that you learn about. And I think it's really beautiful that you also acknowledge, you're like, well, I kind of know that Vietnam's all the way over there. I've been there. I've been there. You've been there. Did you say you've been there once? Or
no, never been.
You haven't been there, but you
never
know.
Been. Yeah.
See, so, you know, I might, you know, but you know, you have this, that's right. But you've been exposed to it through what you get to know here. And yeah, I love what you said about maybe potentially exploring. Look, I know the world, the way the world is now, and what travel could look like it or not. That's one thing. But I like to say, and like, just, you know, highly encourage and offer that, like, I mean, what can go wrong? Like, we can only learn more about the world and ultimately about ourselves, right? I'm someone who I've been to India once when I was 11 and once when I turned 20, and that's it. It's been a decade now. And I feel you on that, where it's like not the same level of connection. And I guess it's not an accident or coincidence that a lot of what I've tuned into, even here in the Bay Area, is like groups with South Asian appeal and like Indian roles, because in a way the arts has been my tool to like unpack, like, oh, you know, we're writing a story or script, you know, and enact arts with the reframing the Jungle Book, right? So that it has its Indian roots, because I can go there right now, or I'm not going there right now, but like I can embrace my Indianness, right? I dance salsa and bachata, and I embrace my Puerto Ricanness. So, you know, it all comes down to like what you said was so beautiful. It's like this sense of the belonging, having roots, and feel like you have a place that you come from, right? Something to own. So, you know, and with that being said, you know, I'm really excited, and I really would like to invite you now in this wonderful conversation. Josie Dillon here, who's been watching, has commented, an interesting conversation. And I'm really grateful to those that have been tuning in and out and listening. And you can catch the replay and share some love and your thoughts. But speaking of owning it, I would really love to have you own this opportunity as we wrap up, to share about yourself and what you're up to. We heard a little bit about your acting and marketing. So if there's anything else you want to say, or a website you'd like me to share, and I can pop it up on the screen, but I'd love you to, you know, we got to know so much about you so richly in your identity, but like, you know, who are you in the world now? What are you up to now? Tell us.
Okay. If I need to be plugging things, so I'm working with the Tabard Theater Company here in downtown San Jose, and I'm the marketing director. We've been working on producing live stream work, where we try to have the actors live in the room, and then with no audience, and then we broadcast from there. Wow. So it's been a lot of hard work, and so we have It's a Wonderful Life getting ready to open next week. But as far as so you should definitely tune in. It's going to be a wonderful show. I'm only just doing the marketing materials on that. I'm not working as an actor. But then I will be in our production of Arsenic and Old Lace coming up in January, playing Elaine Harper in that. So if you want to tune in and check me out as an actor, you can do that.
That's amazing. Where can people? I'm so excited. I know that I think you just had a show that wrapped last week too, right? Were you in something?
Oh yes, I worked on. Oh, that was a wonderful production, The True Tale of Princess Kaguya, with Kunoichi Productions. That was a fantastic, very, very diverse show, and was interesting. Oh, we didn't even get into this whole other conversation, but that was connected to Japanese culture and kind of a hybrid performing arts group that they have started there, incorporating traditional Japanese dance forms and music and green screen work and puppetry, and it was really cool. And I don't know if you can access that show online still, but that was kunoichiproductions.com if anybody's interested in at least seeing more about it. It was very interesting show.
That's awesome. So it sounds like if you go to either, there's Kunoichi Productions, and then and so I'm gonna bring both up on the screen, that, and then where can we go if we wanna tune into with Tabard Theater Company, right? You mentioned, right? And what you're being performing in?
Yeah. Oh, you know what would be the easiest thing to do is I'll tell you my first and last name, StephanieWiggum.com, is my website, and whatever I'm working on is on there. So
yeah, I like that. So we are gonna that is the easiest way. And we do hope that you make sure it's spelled right, okay? On the too. I know that StephanieWiggum.com and Kunoichi Productions, right? Is that correct down there too? That she was just a part of as well. But anything anything you heard, you see that you like about Stephanie, she so graciously dedicated her time with me this afternoon here on the West Coast. It's 1:21 our time, and thanks for taking this lunch hour with me to share about yourself, your mixed race identity, with, like we said, again, your dad from Alabama with a Scottish background, and your mom, you're Vietnamese. It's just so wonderful. Thanks for looking to unpack this with me. Just get to know.
A lot to unpack. Thank you so much for having me here.
I know, to get to know a little bit about you and your life. And I mean, is there anything, I'm curious, because we started this conversation, you going, like you wrote in our messages, like, I really haven't looked at myself really too much through this lens of like my Vietnamese, Southern white, like mixed race identity. It sounds like you've mostly identified with your Southern background, but about your Vietnamese background. You have a Vietnamese mom. So I'm curious if you have any takeaways or ahas from this conversation, because I know that was new for you too, right? It's not like you're going around like, hey, I'm mixed race, but you're like, but I am. So I'm curious how you feel right now.
No, I'm not going to be able to. I'm going to have to just go and ruminate. There's going to be some marinating that happens. I don't know. I definitely, this conversation has given me a lot to think about. And some stuff came up that we've already talked about that was sort of new to me from just in my emotionally preparing myself for this interview. I was like, because I never think about this. So we've definitely covered some stuff that was new to me to even examine. So I thank you for that. And I've definitely given myself more new stuff to now, put in the Instant Pot, and it's gonna go for a while and see.
That is so great. And that's the point, right? These conversations that we've been having have been all about, knowing thyself.
Yeah.
To the day, who is self, right? Let's really bigger picture and bring, but who is self? Like, it's really who you say you are, right? That counts. I would assert, but there's a way that the world occurs, and there's around us, and there's the way that people view you, right? And so thanks for exploring and negotiating all that too. There you are, and I'm really happy that we have Stephanie. If you're a mixed race woman like me or Stephanie, and you're watching, and you want to join conversations and be featured next on an episode like this to talk about your story and invite your friends to watch, or just have a good time. I hope that you feel, I know we got deep, but we got a chance to know each other on screen with some folks watching. Please join us. We're in that group, Mixed Race Women Collective. We're just happy to share and get to know one another. And I hope you have a really great rest of your Black Friday and the last 5 or 6 weeks of 2020.
Yeah.
So, it's awesome.
You too. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, bye. Bye.
Bye.